Any woman who understands the problem of running a home will be nearer to understanding the problems of running a country. Margaret Thatcher, 1979. In the past, most popular stories did not bring positive attention to the powerful women, nor did they empower them. Many Disney movies depict women in the need of men. With what about numerous women who challenge the stereotype? What about a movie for Victoria Woodhull? Most of you have probably never heard of Victoria Woodhull. The lack of women taking rightful place in this history is stunning. Victoria Woodhull was the first woman to run for president of the United States in 1872 election. This was before women could even vote. Victoria California Claflin was born September 23, 1838 in the rural town of Homer, Ohio. She was the seventh of 10 children born to Roxana Hummel Claflin and Reuben Buckman Claflin. Reuben was a snake oil salesman and con artist who deliberately burned the family gristmill to collect the insurance money. Victoria's mother was a dedicated follower of Austrian mystic Franz Mesmer and his new spiritual movement that Victoria would eventually follow. At 11 years old, Victoria left school with only 3 years of education. She never again pursued any formal education. Victoria believed she could communicate with the deceased and heal the sick. With her sister Tennessee, they worked as traveling mediums and in the healing arts, selling elixirs and alternative cures. At 15, Victoria was married to Canning Woodhull, and they had 2 children. Her husband was a womanizer and alcoholic, and Victoria was miserable. Her son Byron was born with a severe intellectual disability that she believed was from Canning's excessive drinking. Victoria divorced her husband. This was unheard of at the time. As a traveling clairvoyant, Victoria acquired a sizable fortune during the Civil War. It is rumored that her and her sister added $700,000 during the gold panic during 1869. This was an enormous amount of money for any woman, let alone to earn on their own. In 1870, Victoria earned the bulk of her wealth as the first female stockbroker to trade on the New York Stock Exchange. She partnered with Cornelius Vanderbilt and built the Wall Street brokerage firm that she operated with her sister. Dubbed the Queens of Finance and Bewitching Brokers, the sisters were subjects of dirty cartoons and sexy satire to label any outspoken and independent woman whom were not under control of men as wanton and sexually immoral. Victoria believed in free love, or in that the idea that a woman to have freedom to leave an unhappy or abusive marriage. She also believed in a relationship with the possibility of marriage or bearing of children, without the fear of labels or subjected to the government interference. This was during a time when women were still considered property of their husbands. This bound them to the men because of the stigma of divorce that would ruin their lives. When asked about her views of free love, she was quoted as saying, "Yes, I am a free lover. I have an inalienable constitutional and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or as short a period as I can, to change that love every day if I please, and with that right neither you nor any law you can frame have any right to interfere." 1871. Even though Victoria was a supporter of the free love movement and outspoken supporter of social freedom, she was very opposed to abortion and promoted the use of eugenics. She believed in eugenics because of her son, whom was profoundly disabled. Her writings were about sex education, marrying well, and good prenatal care in an effort to produce healthy babies and limit the amount of babies born with physical or mental defects. 1870 to 1872 were very important years for Victoria. After opening her brokerage firm, she published a newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly, with her sister. This radical paper touched on issues of great importance to her, such as women's rights, suffrage, and the working class of labor reform. She also used the paper to promote feminism and expose the hypocrisy of tolerance to men's sexual indiscretions versus women's. She also added her commentary to taboo subjects like birth control, prostitution, and sex education. In 1871, Woodhull addressed Congress on the issue of women's suffrage. Being the first woman to ever petition Congress in person brought Victoria an enormous amount of media coverage to her cause. She was an instant hero to fellow suffrage supporters. Some of the tactics she used to push for women's rights caused other feminists to turn away and eventually led to a nasty confrontation between herself and Susan B. Anthony. Victoria's most noteworthy accomplishment came in 1872 when she helped form the Equal Rights Party and became the first woman to run for president. This was almost 50 years before women even had the right to vote. African-American abolitionist Frederick Douglass was nominated for her vice president, but never formally accepted. As a visionary and risk-taker, she ran on the platform of issues as women's suffrage, equal rights, the abolition of death penalty, and welfare for the poor. The original purpose for owning a publishing paper was to bring unlimited media attention to a presidential campaign. On Election Day, Woodhull was arrested for publishing an article exposing and condemning the adulterous behavior of a highly regarded Protestant minister. The content of this story angered some very important people and was labeled obscene, for which she was jailed for over a month. In the end, she did not win any electoral votes, and it is unclear if she even received the popular vote because none of her votes were even counted. She still has the distinction of being the first woman ever bold enough to run for president. Eventually, Victoria left the U.S. and settled in England in 1877 after her second divorce. She was in England until her death in 1927, 20 years before the birth of another iconic woman running for president, Hillary Clinton. She did live long enough to see the passing of the 19th Amendment, the woman's right to vote. With her help from her daughter, she published a magazine called The Humanitarian and wrote the book, The Human Body, the Temple of God. During her first public appearance at St. James Hall while giving a lecture based on the book, she met and found her husband and became Victoria Woodhull Martin. Recognition posthumously, women's rights, sexual freedom advocacy, Woodhull Sexual Freedom Alliance, named in her honor, Woodhull Institute for Ethical Leadership, founded in 1997 by Naomi Wolf and Margot McGowan. Office of the Manhattan Borough President honored her in March 2008 and included her in a map of historical sites dedicated to important women. And in 2001, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Woohoo!